Cynicism as cheekiness that has changed sides. Cheekiness from below is effective when it expresses real energies as it advances. It must consciously embody its power and alertly create a reality that can, at most, be resisted but not denied. When the dissatisfied serf jokingly picks up his master in his arms, he gives a foretaste of the violence his revolt would have. A cheeky neckline which reveals naked female skin plays with the power that the rare exerts over the commonplace. In the old sexual economy, the strength of the weaker sex lay in the deficiency that it voluntarily imposed on the needs of the stronger sex. Finally, religious cheekiness, blasphemy, causes pious seriousness to collapse when the physiologically irresistible energy of laughter attacks it. Certain small phrases irrefutably advance cheeky realism from below against law. Two sets of two words, each of which deflates false pretensions. So what? And why not? With a persistent so what, many young people have driven their incorrigible parents enlighteningly to frustration. Children's playgroups are often good schools for enlightenment because they train the saying of so what, incidentally in a natural way. That would be nothing other than the practice the fully socialized find so difficult, to say no always at the right moment. The fully developed ability to say no is also the only valid background for yes, and only through both does real freedom begin to take form. I'm going to assume that means begin. And only through both does real freedom begin to take form. That which has power can take liberties. Power, however, is above and below, of course, in distorted proportions. The serf is not nothing, and the masters are not everything. Subjugation is just as real as domination. The power of the underdog comes into its own individually as that cheekiness which constitutes the core of power in cynicism. With it, those who are disadvantaged can anticipate their own sovereignty. A second level on which the underdogs try out possibilities of willfulness is subversion. Willful praxis in the sense of semi-liberties that stretch the law. We probably only seldomly make clear to ourselves how immense the factor of subversion in our society can be. A world in shadows, full of secretive cheekiness and realisms of all kinds, full of resistances, discharges, machinations, and a sense for one's own advantage. Half of normality consists of microscopic deviations from the norms. This field of willfulness, of the little tricks in life, and of black morality is almost just as unresearched as, on the other side, the expansion of corruption. Both are, in the nature of things, scarcely accessible. We know about them, but do not speak about them. The freedom of the hegemonic powers is also a double freedom. In the first place, it comprises the privileges and liberties of masters that are connected with hegemonic power itself. There is no cheekiness involved in taking such liberties, but there is tact in not being ostentatious in enjoying them. Most of the old seigneurs, for example, did not exercise the right to sexual feudalism, the right to the first night with the brides of serfs, and the high life of today's super-rich is discreetly concealed behind middle-class facades or in closed milieus. But also for the powerful there is something that amounts to semi-liberties. As a rule, they allow themselves such liberties only under pressure because, in so doing, they betray themselves to opposing consciousness. The consciousness of the master knows its own specific cheekiness. Master cynicism, in the modern sense of the word, as distinct from the cynical offensive. Ancient cynicism, Primary and pugnacious cynicism was a plebeian antithesis to idealism. Modern cynicism, by contrast, is the master's antithesis to their own idealism as ideology and as masquerade. The cynical master lifts his mask, smiles at his weak adversary and suppresses him. C'est la vie, noblesse oblige. Order must prevail. The force of circumstances often exceeds the insights of those concerned. Is that not so? Coercion by power, the compulsion of things. In its cynicisms, hegemonic power airs its secrets a little, indulges in semi-self-enlightenment, and tells all. Master cynicism is a cheekiness that has changed sides. Now it is not David who challenges Goliath, but the Goliaths of all times, from the arrogant Assyrian military kings to modern bureaucracy, who show the brave but doomed David who is on top and who is on the bottom. Cynicism in public service. The wittiness of those who are in any case on top assumes some strange forms. When Marie Antoinette inquired after the reasons for the unrest among the people, she was told, "The people are starving, Your Majesty, they have no bread." Her reply, "If the people have no bread, why don't they eat cake?" Conversely, F.J. Strauss says, "In life we cannot eat black forest cake every day." As soon as master consciousness has unmasked itself even slightly with its cynicisms, it betrays itself to the oppositional power. But what if there is no such power? In societies where there is no effective moral alternative, and where potential oppositional powers are to a large extent entangled in the apparatuses of power, there is no longer anybody in a position to become outraged about the cynicisms of hegemonic power. The more a modern society appears to be without alternatives, the more it will allow itself to be cynical. In the end, it is ironical about its own legitimation. Basic values and excuses merge imperceptibly. The bearers of hegemonic power in the political and economic sense become hollow, schizoid, unconvincing. We live under the management of respectable players. If earlier great politicians were those who were free enough to become cynics so they could play coolly with means and ends, today every functionary and backbencher is as experienced in this regard as Talleyrand, Metternich and Bismarck put together. Jürgen Habermas, with his theory of the crisis of legitimation, has undoubtedly struck a nerve of nerves in modern political systems. The question remains, who can be the subject of knowledge about the legitimation crisis? Who enlightens and who is enlightened? Cynicism proceeds by way of a diffusion of the subject of knowledge, so that the present-day servant of the system can very well do with the right hand what the left hand never allowed. By day, colonizer. At night, colonized. By occupation, valorizer and administrator. During leisure time, valorized and administered. Officially a cynical functionary, privately a sensitive soul. At the office, a giver of orders, ideologically a discussant. Outwardly a follower of the reality principle, inwardly a subject oriented towards pleasure. Functionally an agent of capital, intentionally a democrat. With respect to the system, a functionary of reification. With respect to the Lebenswelt, the life world, someone who achieves self-realization. Objectively a strategist of destruction. Subjectively a pacifist. Basically, someone who triggers catastrophes, in one's own view. Innocence personified. With schizoids anything is possible, and enlightenment and reaction do not make much difference. With the enlightened, integrated person, in this world of clever, instinctive conformists, the body says no to the compulsion of the head, and the head says no to the way in which body procures its comfortable self-preservation. This mixture is our moral status quo.